Okay. Thank you, Talika. So I am so thrilled to have Shahnaz Masani with us today. I've known Shahnaz for a number of years now, working together on a number of projects, and I'm so thankful. Shahnaz is an assistant professor in the physiology department at the Lion Briggs College at Michigan State University. As a biology education researcher, her lab engages in participatory, interdisciplinary research approaches that center students as experts, researchers, and co-creators of justice-centered biology learning environments. And we are also joined by Shahnaz's graduate student, Reagan. And Reagan, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. And I'd like to hand it over now to Shahnaz.
Wonderful. Gonna start screen sharing. Thank you so much for having me here. Is the screen sharing okay? Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you for having me here. I look forward to having this really wonderful and I hope deep conversation with y'all. I'm gonna first hand it over to Reagan. Reagan is here because they are awesome and everybody needs to meet them. I mean, this is just true. Reagan is my grad student, but they were my undergraduate student before that in a couple of classes. They were an undergraduate learning assistant with me, and they also are instructor of this curriculum. And I just think it'll be wonderful for us to have multiple perspectives and insights, right? As people who first designed the curriculum and then people who have helped create its wonderful subsequent iterations. Reagan, go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Reagan Levy, and I am a second-year PhD student in the Molecular, Cellular, and Integrative Physiology program here at Michigan State University. I am so honored to be able to work with Shahnaz, and the research that I do is I look at undergraduate learning or teaching assistants and the ways they conceptualize and practice equity in STEM classrooms. And really, in particularly, I look at the ways they're conceptualizing race, gender, and disability status, and the ways that those show up in their classroom practice. And so I am really excited to be able to talk to you all today about what we actually do in class a little bit more.
So today we're going to talk about my dream social justice cure, one iteration of which I run in my introductory biology lab. And it's certainly, I want to just start by acknowledging not at the place where I dream it could be, but it's a start. And I think I'm a person who really enjoys the process and the thinking and the change. And so I'm hoping through this that we'll kind of build a community to do that together. In this cure, my introductory biology students, it's an organismal class. They run their own projects. They design and implement projects that explore historical contexts of inequities, both in human health and in ecosystems. And I want to start by acknowledging again, Melanie mentioned that I work at Lyman Briggs College. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a small residential college at Michigan State University, so on the main campus. And our mission at this college, it's undergraduate teaching focused, and it aims to bridge science and society. And so I work together really closely with a lot of sociologists and historians and philosophers of science, and that has deeply shaped my worldview, and they are my collaborators. So this curriculum wasn't designed by me, it was co-designed with Niloufer, who at the time of designing this was a postdoctoral fellow and now is assistant professor at Michigan State University, and Kriya Velasco, who is a postdoctoral research associate at MSU. And both Niloufer and Kriya have both a social sciences and then a humanities background. And so it was really this interdisciplinary team that put this together, and that is important. Today we're going to do really a three-part structure with a final conversation and reflection. We'll first talk about what we dreamt our students could be doing. Then we'll talk about the context, what made it possible, followed a little by the curriculum and revisiting the outcomes, and then final reflections. So let's start with what I want my students to do. I want my students to be able to design and implement ecological research projects. That's my lab class. But I want them to do so and also to be able to situate their knowledge in historical practices and structures, right? So not just what does the world look like today, but how did it come to be this way? Understanding that, finding ways to then address some of those inequities. That is what I dreamt for my students. And I will share today just like one short example outcome, right? This is one figure made by one group in this class. And you see here that they are walking through the difference in redlining and greenlining, but they aren't just using those words as buzzwords. They are giving me explicit detail on the local context of each of these policies. What did redlining look like in the area that I'm thinking about and why? When we're talking about denied federal loans or generational wealth, what did that look like in the area that I'm thinking about again, right? Because we know that there are broad principles to be learned and there are unique contextual differences to be understood. And then within that historical knowledge, as they go through this causal process, right? This caused this, caused this, caused this. Then they're adding new ecological knowledge, right? Knowledge that didn't exist about this context. In this case, this group is thinking through how and why redlined and non-redlined areas differ in their microbial species diversity and rates of respiratory diseases. So those are the broad connections that they're piecing together. And as I think about this type of project, right, I think back to, okay, what does my disciplinary society want students to learn? I'm teaching ecology, so I look at the ESA guidelines, and this fits right in with core concepts, right? They're using core concepts of community and species diversity. They're applying key ecological practices of fieldwork, and they're designing and critiquing their own investigations. And they're thinking through, in this group's case, urban ecology within the context of environmental justice. And what I want from this outcome, right, is my students to start seeing biology as a path to healing and social justice. And what I mean by that is often when we talk about issues of equity or justice, we tend to talk at students. This is the way the world is. This is some data. I'm going to explain it to you. And I don't want that for my students. I think that builds thin knowledge that can quickly be undone. I want them to engage, just as I want them to engage in the scientific practices. I want them to think about social justice from the perspective of authentic inquiry. Bring in your experiences, build your knowledge, learn to read the world. And so that's what I want them to do. And I want them to situate this knowledge within a structured social and historical context. And I'll explain what I mean by that, because again, we all say words, but I'm not sure we always are talking about the same thing. And so I want to be really explicit. When I say this, what do I mean? Well, we often think about science, society, community, identity as these different buckets, right? And so we'll be doing the science, and then we'll say, okay, now we'll talk about the DEI part, and now we'll talk about society, and now let's think about how to get our students to belong. And what I want to do in my classroom is acknowledge that that's not actually the way the world operates. The world is messy, and we want to engage in this messiness. Beauty comes from this messiness. I also want to be explicit that when I talk about structures, I think about how society is structured along colonial, racialized, gendered, ableist lines. And when I talk about history, we start asking that question is, okay, but what caused it to be this way? How did this come to be? And so next, we're going to talk just a little bit about the context. I'll give you an initial context to the classroom, and then I'm going to hand it over to Reagan. So we have introductory, lecture, and lab as one single class. That's the way we run things here. We also have 18 to 24 students per lab section, which means we have about 48 students per lecture section. And I'm saying these things because I want to acknowledge that there's privilege in the ways that I teach, right? There's a lot of privilege built in to teaching in a classroom like this. We also have 3 teaching team members in a lab section, an instructor, in this case, Reagan, and 2 undergraduate learning assistants. Students are working in groups of 3 to 4, designing and conducting these independent projects. And our disciplinary group of biologists has shared learning objectives, but we have a customizable curriculum. And all of those things that I just mentioned are privileges as an educator, and I want to acknowledge that. My course is structured broadly along big questions that we're asking, 4 big questions. And one of those 4 questions is, how do historical, social, and cultural factors influence our understanding and practice of biology? So this isn't a one-off, it's an integral part to every part of lecture and lab. And with that, we're gonna do our first activity. I'm gonna welcome you to literally day 1 in my class. So put yourself in the mindset of my students for a minute. You are a first or second year undergraduate student. You come into your intro bio class. We talk about our 4 big questions, and then we go into this activity. What I'm going to ask you is, think about a situation where you've met an alien being that's come to Earth for the first time. And they ask you, I've heard about this concept. I just overheard this concept called disease. What is disease? And just to keep things simple and contained, let's think about non-infectious disease as we think about this, okay? So we're gonna do 1 minute of quiet reflection. And we're gonna start this dialogue process beginning with 1 volunteer, okay? Does that feel good? All right, here's our minute reflection. And that's about time, y'all. Does anyone, brave person, want to either raise their hand or unmute themselves and start this dialogue with me, the alien being? What is disease? Reagan, not you. Just saying.
Disease is when the parts of your body are no longer working together to make your body work as optimal as it can.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about optimal? How would I know optimal? Like, how would I see somebody and be like, you're not at optimal? Anybody can, I'm just saying, like, you could, Talitha, or anybody can. It's just free form.
I'll stay quiet.
And I think we also had a comment in the chat.
Woo. An unexpected change in the human response. So I'm gonna wait on the what is optimal, and I'm also gonna put out there, I noticed that this person woke up refreshed and amazing, and then suddenly midday just felt really tired. Disease? That was a surprise. They didn't expect it. Thoughts? Does anybody want to follow up on what is optimal? How would I recognize optimal?
You have a couple responses in the chat, I think.
Yeah, for optimal, I was saying maybe if it's like significantly less than others, like if there's a normal amount or an average amount. I know things can vary person to person, but yeah, if something is functioning less, maybe.
Yeah, interesting. My sister is 4'10", significantly shorter than the average. Stop us there, but you see where we're going with this, right? This slowly leads into a discussion on what we often try to do is we put things into buckets, right? Like that is biology and that is society, and maybe that's not as useful. Maybe what's useful is to think through where does the societal construction come in, right? What we're not doing in this class is saying there's no biological basis to disease. There clearly is. And there is social construction to the concept of disease also. And the fun bit is when you figure out how those two kind of blend together. On exam 1, we ask students, okay, you've had a series of classes. What is one moment that just made you feel really strongly? And this is one student who says, when we did the alien disease activity, their response was, I feel like my brain has been altered, right? And that is what I want from, I want my students to see the world in lots of different ways. And this is not the experience for all students, but you will see that we, not back, forward. You'll see that we see repeated patterns here, right? Patterns where students are talking about plating and connecting these different big concepts, right? Molecular to inheritance to evolution, and within the context of history and society, talking about eugenics movement and redlining. You'll also see that students talk about the structure of the ways that we do things, right? Not just the content, it's content and practice. So the importance of problem solving, right? The importance of problem solving in a group. And we take a lot of care to set up groups. We do group contracts, we do all of those things. And also we make students reflect on what is it like to work in a group in a society that is racialized and gendered and ableist. If we're going to talk about this in the science, we're going to talk about this in the science classroom also. We are also a part of society. So there's a lot of moving pieces to the context of this class. And maybe we'll skip the in the chat portion, but what I will leave you thinking about today within this context is that learning environments themselves are ecosystems and are a part of histories and societies and structures. And as you think about your classroom, what does your ecosystem provide to help students thrive and to make the world a better place? You know what, actually, this is a place of joy. Let's do it. What's your one thing? Like, what's your, like, if you were to say, like, this is my one thing that I love and I do, and my students just get energized with it. What's that one thing you do? Put it in the chat. Is it a topic? Is it a practice? Is it something small you say? What are some of the things we do? That's wonderful. So they're constructing, they're building, work with each other, collaborate. Vulnerability is so important. Yep, we are human. These are all beautiful. Oh my gosh, grounding exercises, yes. Oh, 100%. Jokes are not a small thing. It's huge. It sets the tone. We started off with a really silly question for a reason. These are all amazing. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the curriculum, and I'm going to pass it on to Reagan.
So I am going to sort of take you through the first activity that we do with our students in lab. And so our curriculum is based off of a 4-week Richmond case study where we introduce them on how to map or model inequities from historical times to modern ecological and health inequities that we see. And the way we do this is we look at Richmond, Virginia, and redlining in comparison to Gilpin, and a lot of the effects that come with that from an ecological standpoint, like pollutants and heat islands, and also to a health standpoint, like increased rates and incidence of diabetes or asthma and other chronic conditions. Then the second part of what we do for the last like 3/4, 2/3 of lab is we design and have them actually implement their own research projects where they choose a historical inequity that they're interested in and then bring it to modern times with both ecological and health data. And we really ground them with a lot of different scaffolding. So we start them with a literature review where we have them split up into macro, meso, and micro levels, as well as help them design research question and hypothesis, and help them with all of the methods and stuff. And then after that point, what they do is they start the actual data collection process. They bring it into lab. They ask questions about how to analyze and interpret this new thing, because for most, this will be the first time that they are designing their own research project, their own methodology. And so there's a lot of questions and confusion. But then when they are able to bring this into a proposal for the communities that they are interested in and that were affected. So we know that 11 weeks is not enough time to do a full research project. Heck, even 15 weeks is probably not enough time to do a full research project. And so we want to give them something that is actionable to be able to do, which is this community centered research proposal. And so we start off in this Richmond case study. We have like these different levels on it, from the macro and overall to the individual stories and person people. And so first what we're going to do is talk you through that introduction to the case study. And so we're going to ask you a question, and I want you all to hold your answers in chat for about a minute, and then you can send them in. But this is the exact activity we give our students, which is explain why you might see the difference in ecology and human health that's described below. And I'll allow you all to read it, but I will go through the bolded parts, which is talking about how Gilpin, which is a not wealthy white neighborhood in Virginia, can see temperatures that are 15 degrees above healthier, whiter parts of town, and rates of cardiac arrest and respiratory diseases like asthma directly increase with heat and other ecological factors. So if you want to take about a minute to read through this and then put your answers in chat, and I'll let you know when to send them in. All right, so if you have any ideas at all, you should send them into chat. So any reason that you could think of why we might see these differences.
I'm seeing vegetation and canopy cover and blacktop. Higher density of people, infrastructure. And Reagan, if you were in lab, what would you ask them next?
So I would be like, absolutely, we do see all of these things in Gilpin. And these are great responses. How did we get to this point? Why do you think that we are here? How did we get to where there are less trees in Gilpin and so much more blacktop and that sort of thing? Our
yeah.
students usually don't get to that point quite so quickly. Um, but that is one of the things that we sort of talk about and make sure to touch on, especially with our review of redlining.
Okay.
Mhm.
All absolutely valid.
And so, when we are doing this, we also have the undergraduate learning assistants going around these tables. This is typically a group activity of 3 or 4 people. And we are just sort of probing them, being like, absolutely, you are right. There's economic differences, there might be vegetation. What else? And we sort of help them come to as many different ideas as they can think of. And then once they've thought of all that, it becomes how? How did we get here? How did these wealthy areas become whiter and whatnot? And so we actually get like a lot of very cool responses for that first idea, like I was sharing, of like a lot of what you all were talking about, where it's sometimes about the construction and sometimes about vegetation, as well as access to healthcare or other things.
All right. Thank you, Reagan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as you see, what we're doing here is we're eliciting their experiences, their knowledge, and we're now hoping to like build on those, right? Like build from those, re-articulate those, reform those. And so the thing that we do next, right, is to start thinking about, okay, we have some idea of the what is different, right? Like what are these differences, access to healthcare, access to canopy cover, all of these things. Now let's think about what made the world this way. How did we come to be? And we do this by scaffolding the construction of a model. And I'll take you through maybe like 1 or 2 parts of that process. The first part we start with is let's start right at the top of history. Let's get to the most historical part that we're going to talk about. And we do that by sending them to this database. Melanie, could you drop the link to the database? What we're asking them to do with this database is to look at redlining decisions in Richmond. So this database, if y'all are not familiar, is a wonderful resource because it actually has historically archived area descriptions, right? And so I'm asking students to look at raw data in those databases and build those analytic skills, draw those conclusions based on the data. So we're asking them to explore how neighborhoods were assessed for creditworthiness, and we're specifically asking them to pay attention to the factors considered as well as the language used. That's what I'm going to ask you to do. Open up that case study, spend maybe about a minute just looking through things, and then maybe we'll just ask you to share some things that you noticed out loud. For those of you who are really familiar with this, what are some things that every time you go back to it, strike you deeply? All right, folks. Could I ask maybe 1 or 2 of you to share? And you could share, is this new? Have you used this? Do you use this differently? Do you have different resources? What are some things you notice? Really open to hearing your thoughts on whichever one of those probes you want to go with.
Can I ask what So the credit worthiness, is that like a
Mhm.
credit score, or I guess I'm not sure what credit worthiness is.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And so to contextualize, we introduce students to the concept of redlining before we send them to the database. So creditworthiness as defined by the Homeowners Loan Corporation was exactly what you think it is, right? How much is the risk in giving them loans specifically to buy a house? So this federal institution came about after the Great Depression to kind of rebuild the housing market. And so they're assessing risk with loan giving for
So
homeowners.
is this like your personal credit if you live in a green area or a red area, or the loan you would get if you're trying to move to a red or a green area?
It is both, right?
Okay.
It is explicitly seeing where it is explicitly saying, if you live here, this is how much risk you would have, and we would take in giving you a loan, and this is how much your house should cost based on that, right? So it's like an intertwined cycle of both.
Got it.
Mhm. For those of you who this is like new for, to give you context, it was absolutely used by federal lending agencies to make decisions, but also by private lending agencies, right? So it's really this perpetuating and widening cycle. Other folks, questions, thoughts, some things you noticed? Questions about how you navigate the database?
There was a
Ooh.
comment in chat sort of about the language that was used in a lot of the area descriptions.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. Mm-hmm. Foreign born. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So we're seeing these connections with also industrial sites. Mhm. Salary differences. So there's the intersection, right, of race and class and socioeconomic status, all of these intersections. Yeah. So I'll share a little bit about what this assignment looks like, right? What we're asking students to do is first do what you did, right? Explore the database in Richmond, explore several areas, pay attention to the factors considered, right? Who was in what zone, what type of area was in what zone, and the language used. They then construct an argument to support their claim, right? Their claim lists the main factors that were actually considered as opposed to the stated factors, right? Was it just creditworthiness or were there other intersecting factors? They then list evidence across multiple A zones, B zones, C zones, and then describe those broader patterns in their reasoning. And then finally, they learn how to cite a source, right? So you see, we're kind of scaffolding not only a knowledge, building a knowledge of redlining as a policy, but also how do you construct a paragraph where you want to communicate an evidence-based claim? How do you cite that source? All of those are scaffolded into the assignment. And here are some students' initial reflections, right? So you see students reflecting on African Americans and areas with African Americans always deemed as bad areas or D zones. They specifically notice the language describing them, and they're coming to this slow realization that it seems that creditworthiness was an excuse to redline areas based on other factors. You see this other student again recognizing both race and socioeconomic status and recognizing the language used. This student is also recognizing that terms like melting pot are used in a really negative way, whereas now we would not use the same thing, right? So this type of activity for us leads to really rich conversation on the meaning of language, the way that we use language and the way that it changes over time. And this is one example of what that argument might look like, right? And you see that this student is recognizing they're creating a pretty complex understanding through this process, right? They're talking about intersections of racism and classism and xenophobia as we do, as we look through this data. And I'll pause here before moving to see if you have any questions or comments. Sally, thank you for mentioning racial covenants. Absolutely. We talk about those and we explicitly use an excerpt from a racial covenant from a deed in Lansing, which is where the university is. Yeah, absolutely. Mhm. Okay, so now they have that top end of their model. We take them to, okay, what does that bottom end look like? And so we take them through a different database that kind of overlays initial zoning decisions from green to red with current ecological and health outcomes, right? So social vulnerability, amount of pollution, those types of things. And so there again, they're comparing, well, the zones that were originally red, do they stay vulnerable or have things changed over time, and they're looking for those patterns. So that's how they kind of bookend their model. And then we ask them, okay, now is the really tough part. Tell me why things changed or why things did not change. Fill in that. And everything that you fill in needs to be causal. You can't just say we went from here to here. You got to tell me how. What is the chain of events? And to do that, we build their skills in qualitative textual analysis. So they look at a couple of articles that walk through what happened to sustain these disparities. And they build a map or a pathway or a model that goes from one concept to the next. And this is, again, just the first day that they build the model. They're going to revisit this, thinking through different perspectives. For example, what we just talked about is the macro level map. By macro, we mean broad societal structures, right? Going from histories of redlining to current ecosystems and health. When we think about the meso level, we're going like one scale down. So I always think about it as like changing the lens on your microscope. So you're looking just a little bit closer. And so this could be any detailed context, institution, community. And the part that I will talk about within this assignment is one that I think is the most important. We talk at the meso level about community level resistance and responses, because what I don't want my students to go away with is thinking, oh, these poor people in these poor areas, we just gonna go help them, because that's not true, right? These communities have life and resistance and expertise, and we ignore that. And that's why the harm persists. And so we want to kind of overturn, challenge that narrative. And so as part of our meso level response, we look to some wonderful work that they've done in Gilpin and other parts of Richmond. And we talk about, so this is a YouTube video that we watched. They read an article. You're also seeing the accompanying slide. What happens here is we have many not-for-profit organizations coming together from the community, along with city officials, along with funding agencies, to give power back to the community, right? So this community designed a green space for themselves, paid community members to build that green space, manage that green space by themselves, right? And so what we're trying to tell students is, don't think about this as they built a park. They did build a park, and that is important, but think about the process. What are all the things it took to do this in an ethical way? And we ask students as they do this to think about what science would look like that was done with and by communities, not on and for communities. We're asking them to fundamentally shift the ways that we think and talk about science. This is one example of their model at the end of this, right? You saw the models that they came in with. They were wonderful and subtle and detailed, but perhaps could use some building with the historical context. And this is what they're leaving after 4 weeks with. And I'll just say, I think that's amazing. Our students are amazing. As you think through student reflections, students think through this just simple 4-week case study. And remember, this case study is paired with, we're also giving them ecological skills, right? So we're like, how do you do sample size? How do you think through randomization? How do you do species diversity? What does that even look like? And as they do this, they think about, well, I, over the course of just 4 weeks, have added lots more intersections and connections, right? So they're slowly building and re-articulating their knowledge structures. They talk about this being really uncomfortable, and I want to acknowledge that these things are uncomfortable, right? You see a student here saying, as students, as humans, we like to explain away a lot of things as coincidence or circumstance. But doing this causes me to reflect and realize people do bad things to other people, which is something that is hard to acknowledge. And for me, the most exciting thing is students reflect on the fact that they have new understandings of science and community, right? That is our Briggs mission. They talk about when it came to science and community, I just thought it was communication between the two, right? So scientists have to speak to the rest of the public. I viewed them as two separate entities, but now I think that the boundaries between the two are much less well defined. That is my goal for this class. Ooh, what happened there? And finally, doing these types of activities, students will reflect, affirm the value and create space for thinking through justice and equity, right? You see a student here saying, these things that we're learning are so important to me, are part of my purpose. Professional purpose is something we talk about a lot in class, so that's what they're referring to here. So I've talked through some of the ways that we scaffold their skills. I was maybe hoping that we could spend, I want to say 3 minutes adding databases, workshops. Let's not put it in the document, let's put it in the chat. Like, what are things you use? You are doing amazing things. I know this. I need to know about those things. Send me a database, send me an article, send me an example. What are you doing?
I love the crowdsourcing. Shahnaz, that's a great idea.
I need to know. Oh my gosh.
I'll put in a chat a couple of articles we also use in class and lab.
Mhm. 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 Taylor, I haven't seen these resources. Thank you for sharing. Oh my gosh. Because we have a list of both databases and historical policies that we give to our students every year as they start brainstorming. And so really what I'm doing is crowdsourcing for my students. Opportunity Atlas, yep, amazing. Okay, final minute, y'all, if you have something to share. It could be just a thought piece. Melanie, is it possible to send the list out to everybody who's here, or put it up somewhere? I don't know.
We can. We have our YouTube channel and we also have our Slack.
Wonderful.
So those are 2 places that we can share these resources. Yes.
Okay. For the interest of time, I'm going to move on, but keep putting those resources in there. They are so important. I'll take you through a quick 5 minutes of the rest of the semester, and then I'll end with a final reflection. You can't do a 4-week case study and then say, now go do your own project, right? That is hard. You have to scaffold that design process. And so I just want to point out that we have multiple iterative scaffolds with lots of formative feedback. You see here our ideation and methodology design starts with simple, just take the chalk and draw out what you want to do, and let's walk through all of the things we've talked about. You want to measure water quality? How are you going to do that? What aspect of water quality? All of those things. And again, to ground you in like, this is where we end up, right? You see students here offering to the community, if this is something you are interested, if you would want to do this together, these are the ways that we could model how the world came to be, and these are the new questions we might ask. In the latest iteration, we asked them to communicate things like, why did you choose that kit? Why did you choose that stats test? How might one go about doing a stats test? What does it mean? So we're kind of really, really hoping that this is a database of things that we can start offering to communities as tools. And to kind of end my part of this, I'll say that at the end of the semester, students reflect that these projects are very challenging, but also fun, right? They change the way that your thinking happens. They reflect that this is not a linear process, that there are challenging, frustrating, rough spots. And this is very familiar to all of you who do some type of cure, right? This is what you see when you do a cure. But when you do a justice-based cure, you may also shift their perception of what science is. And so you see here students talking about, it allowed me to think about all the things that go into research. I thought it was mainly like plating and colony counting and testing for macronutrients. And it is that, but it's more than that. Research considers the phenomena that we witness in our history, past or present. You see students talking about the lab projects help you think more deeply. It makes you question the way that you're used to doing biology or what you expect biology to be. And with that, I posed a couple of prompts to you, my audience. Go away. It won't let me. There we go. What are some ways that you're teaching this, right? What are some ways that you're linking science, history, society? I'll just call you Aunt Melanie because I know you're doing this and you're doing this a lot because we've talked about it. Share the cool things that you're doing or that you'd want to be doing, right? And if you're like, how do I get started with this? Think of your favorite topic, something that you love to teach, and then think about, well, what is its history? How do we know what we know about that? Can we have the last 10 minutes? Just let's chat. What are you doing?
Also, Shahnaz, I don't entirely know if I answered correctly. I forgot how many hours of lecture do you have a week? 3.5 or 4? Or 2 or 3?
Yeah, it's 2 80-minute lecture classes, and then our lab is about 3 hours.
Is that considered
Once
a
a
four credit class or a 6 credit?
It's a 4 credit class.
Okay, it's four credit. Got it.
What are some things that are coming up for y'all?
So I'll just say that Shahnaz has mentioned that we were working on a similar type project. So one of the things I do in my genetics course is I work alongside another professor in English who teaches a course on race. And we have students in the past, we've had students create materials or learning artifacts that are related to debunking the myth that race is biological. And we're getting students both from the genetics course, also from the race course, to create these materials, and they become learning artifacts for both of our courses. So that's one way that we've been kind of integrating this science and society.
I will also share, like, Rita, if whatever you want that you think would be useful, I will share. Like, you want lesson plans, you want the workbook, whatever you want, just reach out.
All the things, all the things.
Shahnaz, I really appreciate what you've shared today. I just started a new urban ecology class this past fall in Georgia Tech, and we did a cure-based project that was mostly just the science of it. And then I had a unit where we really delved into environmental justice, and we used some of these resources from Richmond and redlining. And I came today because I was like, I really need to take what I did to the next level. And this is such a beautiful way of merging what I sort of already have in place, but needed some more framework. So I will be in touch because I would love to get a little bit more of your resources to help do the same thing, but use the Atlanta maps and have them dig into that. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would love to co-learn. I am not an urban ecologist, and so I'm looking to like build the next set of skills. Talitha, I will share. I'm not sure that these particular databases are available, but I know that some folks have downloaded CDC and EPC databases and are sharing them. You know,
That'd be cool.
yes.
You'll
Yeah.
I don't know if you actually know of any of them, Shahnaz, or if that's more of a nebula. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have some, so I'll look to see if they're one of those. Because every time I see those on like some random person's social media or wherever, I'm like, oh, download. I need that for me. Yeah. I will say that like it's the same for us. Some of the EPA websites that we would use are now gone. Yeah. This is cool. You'll have so many resources. We definitely need to make this like a growing just list of things, right? Especially as like things are being taken away. We need more and more lists.
Do we have that Guardian article? The one about climate change?
Yeah, I can share that.
Is that the one where people taking certain medications cannot, no, it doesn't, cannot cool their bodies down as well, and so are more vulnerable to overheating?
I do know what you're talking about. This one is slightly different because it visualizes different aspects, right? So who is responsible for emissions versus who is most impacted. What if we take only current emissions versus historical emissions? This is kind of one of the things we use again day one in class to get students to visualize the difference between climate change, as you know, framed globally, everyone will be affected, and then recognizing that impacts will be inequitable.
Shahnaz, I had the 2 links. Did you want to share the second link?
If we could, yes, and if we could just get the like list of resources here into there, it was my goal. If I could get like a copy of the chat.
Yes. I think Talitha, would that save chat come to, let's see.
I think it saves locally.
Yeah, I have it. Okay, I do have it.
Are there other like curiosities or questions y'all have, or like insight that you bring from doing this work with your students? We'd love to learn. I can share that one of the challenges that I've had is like responding in the moment to the resistance that sometimes will come up when we talk about things like this. And so sometimes what we do is I will wait and I will like see the reflective response and then respond online with a comment, because it gives me a little bit of time to like take a breather and then answer thoughtfully. And we have like conversations almost offline with each other. it kind of de-escalates the situation.
Do you have these small activities in your classrooms where students are not giving the same set of tools to build whatever it is? A mobile, I think, is the one I remember. So some students will get some basic sticks and ropes and paper, and others get glitter and stuff, and then they're just tasked to build something, and then coming up with what they can and looking around and seeing, wait, right, to make them feel it instead of just trying to, what is the word, rationalize it.
Yeah. I haven't done it in the context of this curriculum, but it's bringing up for me that maybe it would be really useful actually to do that. Thank you for bringing that back up.
All right, we are at 2. I will stop the recording, but we can stick around